The scent of pine and autumn rain clung to my clothes as I huddled against the wooden walls of my cottage, trying to make myself as small as possible. Outside, thunder rumbled across the mountains, but it wasn't the storm that made my heart hammer against my ribs. It was the howls, distant at first, then closer, carrying with them the promise of retribution. I knew they would come eventually. They always did when an outsider crossed their boundaries, even by accident. My fingers traced the silver pendant around my neck, the last gift my grandmother had given me before she passed. She'd been the village healer before me, respected even by those who feared her. "When the wolves come, Ilara," she had whispered, her voice like dried leaves rustling in the wind. "Remember that even the fiercest creatures seek comfort in the end." I hadn't understood her words then. Now, with the pack drawing nearer to my door, I wondered if I ever would. 3 days ago I'd found them, 2 tiny wolf pups, barely old enough to open their eyes, abandoned in a clearing not far from my herb garden. Or so I thought. I should have known better than to assume anything had been abandoned in these woods. These forests belonged to them, to the pack that had protected these mountains for generations, and to their alpha king, a man whose name was only whispered in our village. The villagers spoke of him as if he were more beast than man, with eyes that could freeze your soul, and teeth that could tear through flesh as easily as autumn leaves. Some said he'd been born of the mountain itself, others that he'd made a pact with ancient spirits for immortality. All agreed on one thing: to take anything from his pack was to invite death. Yet there I was, nursing 2 wolf pups back to health, knowing full well whose blood they carried. I'd tried to return them the following day, venturing further into the woods than I'd ever dared, but the storm had disoriented me, driving me back to my cottage where I'd huddled with the pups for 2 more nights, feeding them goat's milk and praying their family wouldn't think I'd stolen them, a prayer that had gone unanswered. The howls grew closer, and beneath them came another sound. The heavy footfalls of men and women who moved with preternatural grace through the forest. I clutched the pups closer to my chest, their tiny hearts beating against mine. They'd been feverish when I found them, too weak to cry out for help. Now they slept peacefully, unaware that their family had come to reclaim them, and possibly take my life as payment for my transgression. The wooden door to my cottage shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. I flinched but didn't scream. What good would screaming do? No one from the village would come to my aid, not against them. "Open the door, thief." The voice was deep, commanding, but surprisingly calm for someone who had come to kill me. "Return what you've taken, and perhaps I'll make your death quick." My hands trembled as I shifted the sleeping pups, careful not to wake them. They were so innocent, so perfect with their silver white fur and tiny paws. In just 3 days, I'd grown to love them as if they were my own. I knew I had to give them back. They belonged with their pack, but some foolish part of me had hoped I might be allowed to see them again, to know they were thriving. "I'm not a thief," I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. "I found them alone, sick. I've been caring for them until I could return them safely." There was a pause, then a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the wooden walls. "Open the door," the voice repeated, "or we'll break it down." With the pup still nestled against my chest, I rose on unsteady legs and moved toward the door. My cottage was small, just 1 room with a fireplace, a bed, and shelves lined with herbs and poultices I used to heal the villagers. It had always felt cozy before, safe. Now it felt like a trap. I lifted the wooden bar and stepped back as the door swung open, revealing a wall of towering figures silhouetted against the stormy sky. At their center stood a man whose presence seemed to fill the doorway, broad-shouldered, with hair as black as midnight and eyes that gleamed like amber in the firelight. The Alpha King. He stepped into my cottage without invitation, his gaze immediately fixing on the bundle in my arms. Behind him, at least a dozen pack members crowded the doorway and surrounded my home, their expressions ranging from fury to cold calculation. They were all dressed in leather and furs, their bodies marked with intricate tattoos that seemed to shift in the flickering light. "So," the Alpha said, his voice deceptively soft as he studied me, "you're the little witch who thought to steal the future of my pack." I wanted to correct him, to explain again that I'd found the pups abandoned, but the words died in my throat as he moved closer. There was something mesmerizing about him. Something both terrifying and magnetic that made my heart race for reasons I didn't fully understand. They were sick, I whispered instead, glancing down at the sleeping pups. I've been giving them medicine, keeping them warm. I tried to bring them back, but the storm... Silence. He raised a hand, and I flinched instinctively, but instead of striking me, he simply reached out to pull back the blanket covering the pups. His expression changed then, just for a moment. A flicker of something softer passing across his features as he gazed at the sleeping pups. One of them stirred, tiny paws stretching before settling back into slumber. "They're alive," he murmured. More to himself than to me, a woman stepped forward from the group, her red hair framing a face as beautiful as it was cold. "We should kill her, Nathaniel. She trespassed on our lands, touched what wasn't hers to touch." Nathaniel. So the Alpha King had a name after all. Not just a title whispered in fear. "The law is clear," another voice added, this one belonging to a man with a jagged scar running down his cheek. "Blood for blood. The pups are heirs to the throne. Heirs to the throne." I glanced down at the tiny creatures sleeping against my chest. They weren't just any wolf pups, they were royalty among their kind. The realization made my knees weak. Nathaniel's gaze never left my face as his pack members called for my death. There was something calculating in those amber eyes, something that made me feel as if he could see through my skin to the rapid beating of my heart. "What is your name, witch?" he asked finally. "Elara," I answered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears, "and I'm a healer, not a witch." His lips curved into what might have been a smile on another man. On him, it looked dangerous. "Healer, witch. What difference does it make? You live alone at the edge of the forest, gathering herbs and making potions. In my experience, that makes you either a witch or a fool." "Or someone who cares for those who cannot care for themselves," I countered, surprising myself with my boldness. Fear could make you reckless sometimes. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that I would dare speak back to him. Behind him, several pack members growled low in their throats, a warning I chose to ignore. "These pups were dying," I continued, emboldened by his silence. "I found them in the clearing near the white oak, burning with fever. Would you rather I had left them there?" The red-headed woman snarled. "You expect us to believe they were abandoned? The Alpha King's own children? Children. Not just heirs, but his children." I looked up at Nathaniel with new understanding. No wonder he'd brought his entire pack to reclaim them. No wonder they wanted blood. "I don't expect you to believe anything," I said softly. "But it's the truth. I would never steal children, wolf or human." As if to underscore my words, one of the pups woke and lifted its tiny head, blinking sleepily at the strangers filling my cottage. Its eyes were amber, just like its father's. It yawned, revealing tiny teeth, then nuzzled back against my chest with complete trust. The entire pack went still, watching this small interaction with expressions ranging from disbelief to suspicion. Nathaniel's face remained unreadable, but something in his posture changed. A subtle relaxing of his shoulders, a softening around his eyes. "The white oak clearing is protected," he said after a moment. "No one could enter it without our knowledge." "Someone did," I replied. "Someone who left these little ones to die." The accusation hung heavy in the air. I had essentially suggested that someone within his pack had attempted to kill the Alpha's children, a treasonous act that would surely be punishable by death. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I feared I'd pushed too far. Then the second pup awoke, letting out a tiny whimper before it caught sight of its father. Unlike its sibling, this one seemed to recognize him, stretching its paws toward him with a plaintive cry. Without asking permission, Nathaniel reached out and took the pup from my arms, cradling it with surprising gentleness against his chest. The sight was jarring. This massive, feared warrior, holding a creature so small and fragile with such care. "Eden," he murmured, stroking the pup's head with one finger. "And Rowan," he added, glancing at the pup still nestled against me. Names. They had names. Somehow that made everything more real, more painful. In 3 days, I'd grown attached to these tiny lives, and now I would have to give them up. They need more care, I said, trying to keep my voice professional, detached. The fever has broken, but they're still weak. They need milk every few hours, and the medicine I've been giving them. You will show us how to care for them, Nathaniel interrupted, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. I blinked in confusion. You're taking me with you? The redhead stepped forward, her face contorted with fury. Nathaniel, you can't be serious. She's human, an outsider. She cannot enter our territory. Silence, Sabine. His voice was quiet, but carried such authority that the woman immediately stepped back, though her eyes still blazed with hatred when they met mine. Nathaniel turned back to me, his expression grave. You will come with us until the pups are fully recovered. You will teach our healers your methods. Then, if I am satisfied with your story and your service, you may return to your cottage. It wasn't a choice. It was a sentence. Temporary reprieve before judgment. But it was better than immediate execution, and it meant I could ensure the pups' survival. What about my village? My patients? I asked, thinking of the pregnant women due to deliver soon. The old man with the persistent cough. The children who came to me with their scrapes and fevers. Your village has survived without you before, he replied dismissively. It will survive a few more weeks. Weeks. I would be in their territory for weeks, surrounded by those who wanted me dead, entirely at the mercy of a man who was said to have none. The storm outside had intensified, rain lashing against the windows and thunder shaking the foundations of my small home. It matched the tempest in my heart. Fear, uncertainty, and a strange, unwelcome fascination with the Alpha King who stood before me, his child in his arms and his pack at his back. Get what you need, he commanded. We leave now. As I gathered my herbs and medicines with trembling hands, I felt Rowan stir against my chest, seeking closer contact with my warmth. I wondered if he would remember me when this was over. This strange human who had cared for him in his time of need, probably not. But I would remember him, and his sister, and the night the pack came for blood but found something else entirely. I looked up to find Nathaniel watching me, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight, unreadable and ancient. The storm raged on outside, but a different kind of storm was beginning inside me. One I wasn't sure I would survive. The journey through the forest was a blur of shadow and rain. The pack moved with inhuman speed, forcing me to stumble along between two guards who gripped my arms whenever I slowed. Nathaniel led the way, Eden tucked securely against his chest, while I clutched Rowan to mine, trying to shield the pup from the worst of the downpour. My soaked dress clung to my skin, and my fair hair had darkened with rain, plastered against my face and neck. The path grew steeper, winding upward into mountains I'd only ever viewed from a distance. These were forbidden territories, the domain of the wolves, where humans dared not tread. Yet here I was, being dragged deeper into their world with each step. Keep up, growled the scarred man who held my right arm, or I'll carry you like the prey you are. I didn't doubt he would. There was no kindness in his eyes, only suspicion and barely contained violence. I forced my aching legs to move faster, focusing on Rowan's warmth against my heart. Whatever happened to me, I needed to ensure the pups' survival. It was the only reason I was still alive. After what felt like hours, the trees began to thin, revealing a valley nestled between towering peaks. Even through the rain, I could make out structures, not the crude dwellings I'd imagined, but buildings of stone and wood, a village far more sophisticated than my own. Smoke rose from chimneys, and lights glowed in windows, creating an almost welcoming sight that contradicted everything I knew about the fearsome wolf pack. As we entered the settlement, faces appeared at windows and doors, eyes glittering in the darkness as they watched our procession. I felt their stares like physical touches, curious, hostile, wary. A human in their midst was clearly an unusual sight. Nathaniel led us to the largest structure at the center of the village, a great hall built of massive timber and stone, its entrance flanked by carved wolves with eyes that seemed to follow our movement. Inside, a fire roared in a central hearth, casting dancing shadows across wooden floors and walls. adorned with weapons and tapestries depicting hunts and battles. "Bring her here," Nathaniel commanded, approaching the hearth. He turned to face me, Eden still cradled protectively in his arms. In the firelight, I could see the pup more clearly. Her silver-white fur was damp from the rain, but her eyes were alert, watching her father's face with unmistakable recognition. Rowan stirred against me, perhaps sensing his sister's alertness, or responding to the warmth of the fire. I loosened my cloak, allowing him to poke his head out. His tiny nose twitched as he took in the unfamiliar scents of the hall. Nathaniel. A new voice, deep and resonant, drew my attention to an older man approaching from a side passage. His hair and beard were silver, but he moved with the same fluid grace as the younger pack members. "The council awaits your explanation." Nathaniel nodded once, his expression hardening. "Tell them I'll join them shortly. First, I must see to my children." The older man's gaze fell on me, his eyes narrowing. "And this is the human who found them? The one who claims they were abandoned?" "I don't just claim it," I said before I could stop myself. "It's the truth." The hall fell silent, every eye turning to me in shock. I realized too late that speaking out of turn was likely another offense worthy of death in their society, but I was tired, cold, and increasingly irritated by being discussed as if I weren't present. To my surprise, the older man's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. She has courage, at least. He stepped closer, studying me with keen eyes that missed nothing. "I am Thorn, advisor to the Alpha King and elder of this pack. What is your name, human healer?" "Elara," I replied, lifting my chin slightly. "And I would appreciate it if someone could tell me exactly what's going to happen to me now that I'm here." Sabine, the red-headed woman who had called for my death at the cottage, stepped forward with a snarl. "What should happen is that we should string her up for the crows. Humans cannot be trusted, especially not with our future." "That decision is not yours to make," Nathaniel said, his voice quiet but carrying unmistakable authority. "The healer will remain here until my children are fully recovered. She will be treated as a guest, not a prisoner." "A guest?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. I'd been forcibly removed from my home and brought to their territory against my will. That hardly qualified as hospitality. "And where exactly will this guest be staying?" Sabine asked, her tone making it clear what she thought of the arrangement. Nathaniel's gaze met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like uncertainty flicker across his features. "She will stay in the healer's quarters beside my own. I want my children nearby, and she must tend to them." Murmurs erupted throughout the hall. Even Thorn looked startled by this declaration. I didn't understand the significance, but it was clearly an unusual arrangement. "Nathaniel," Thorn began, his voice lowered, though I could still hear him clearly. "The council will not approve, after what happened with—" "I don't care what the council approves," Nathaniel cut him off. "My children nearly died. They need care, and she can provide it. That's the end of this discussion." The Alpha King turned to me, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "Come. You're exhausted, and the pups need rest and nourishment." Without waiting for my response, he strode toward a passage at the far end of the hall. With little choice, I followed, acutely aware of the hostile stares boring into my back. Sabine's gaze was particularly venomous, promising retribution when the Alpha King wasn't looking. The passage led to a more private section of the building. Living quarters, I realized, as we passed doors carved with different symbols. Nathaniel stopped before one adorned with spiraling herbs and pushed it open, revealing a small but well-appointed room with a bed, a fireplace already lit, and shelves stocked with what appeared to be healing supplies. "These were my mother's quarters," Nathaniel said, his voice softer than I'd heard it before. "She was our pack's healer before she passed. No one has used this room since." I stepped inside, surprised by the unexpected gesture. "I'm sorry about your mother," I said quietly, meaning it. Loss was something I understood all too well. He nodded once, acknowledging my words without responding directly. "My quarters are through that door," he added, indicating a connecting door I hadn't noticed. "I want to be able to check on the pups throughout the night." The implications of this arrangement suddenly became clear to me. I would be sleeping next to the Alpha King's chambers, separated only by a single door. No wonder the pack had been so shocked by his declaration. "You should change into dry clothes," Nathaniel continued, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. "There are garments in the chest that should fit you. When you're ready, bring Rowan to my quarters so we can feed them both." He turned to leave, then paused, his back to me. "Ilara." The sound of my name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. "Yes?" "If what you say is true, if someone in my pack tried to harm my children, I will find them, and their death will be slow." His voice had dropped to a dangerous rumble, more wolf than man. "But if you're lying to me, if you had anything to do with their disappearance, remember that your village is only a short run from here. I know every name, every face." The threat hung in the air between us, clear and chilling. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the healer's quarters with Rowan still nestled against my chest and my heart pounding like a war drum. I sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing my exhaustion to show now that I was alone. "What have we gotten ourselves into, little one?" I whispered to Rowan, who responded by licking my hand with his tiny pink tongue. The gesture, so innocent and trusting, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In just 3 days, I'd come to care deeply for these pups, knowing all the while that they weren't mine to keep. Now I found myself in the heart of wolf territory, surrounded by those who would happily see me dead, with only the Alpha King's tenuous protection standing between me and a grisly fate. And even that protection relied on my ability to prove I'd had nothing to do with the pups' abandonment, a mystery I had no way of solving. With a sigh, I gently placed Rowan on the bed and moved to the chest Nathaniel had indicated. Inside, I found simple but well-made garments, linen shifts, woolen dresses, leather vests. They were clearly made for a woman, though whether they had belonged to Nathaniel's mother or someone else, I couldn't say. I selected a long green dress that seemed closest to my size and changed quickly, aware that the Alpha was waiting. My own dress was soaked beyond salvation, so I hung it near the fire to dry, hoping the smell of human wouldn't offend the sensitive noses of my wolf hosts. After combing my fingers through my damp blonde hair and splashing water on my face from a basin in the corner, I picked up Rowan and approached the connecting door with trepidation. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated, suddenly overwhelmed by the strangeness of my situation. 24 hours ago, I'd been in my cottage, a simple healer living a quiet life. Now I was about to enter the private chambers of the most feared creature in the mountains, holding his child in my arms and uncertain of my own future. Drawing a deep breath, I knocked softly on the wooden door. "Enter," came the immediate response. I pushed open the door to find a chamber larger than my entire cottage, dominated by a massive bed and a fireplace big enough to roast an ox. Nathaniel stood by a table near the fire, mixing something in a bowl. Eden lay in a carefully constructed nest of furs nearby, watching her father's movements with bright, curious eyes. "The milk is ready," Nathaniel said without looking up. "Come show me how you've been feeding them." I approached cautiously, Rowan beginning to squirm in my arms as he caught the scent of food. "I've been using a cloth soaked in goat's milk," I explained. "They're too young to lap it up on their own, but they can suckle the milk from the cloth." I demonstrated with Rowan, who eagerly began to feed, tiny paws kneading against my arm as he drank. Nathaniel watched intently, then mimicked my actions with Eden, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he tended to his daughter. For a moment, we were just two people caring for young ones in need. The tension between us temporarily set aside in favor of this more immediate concern. But as Rowan finished feeding and settled contentedly in my arms, I caught Nathaniel studying me with an expression I couldn't decipher, something between suspicion and curiosity, as if I were a puzzle he was determined to solve. "Tomorrow," he said finally, "you will tell me exactly how you found my children, every detail. And Ilara," his voice dropped lower, "I'll know if you're lying." Morning arrived with pale light filtering through wooden shutters and the distant sounds of a village coming to life. For one disoriented moment, I thought I was home, but the unfamiliar sense of cedar and smoke quickly reminded me of my situation. I was in the wolves' territory, sleeping in a dead woman's bed, with my life hanging by the thinnest of threads. Rowan had spent the night in a small fur-lined basket near my bed. He stirred now as I sat up, letting out a tiny yawn that revealed pink gums and infant teeth. Despite everything, the sight made me smile. At least one of us slept well, I murmured, reaching down to stroke his silky fur. His amber eyes, so like his father's, gazed up at me with complete trust. The connecting door to Nathaniel's chambers remained closed, but I could hear movement beyond it. The soft pad of footsteps, the clink of metal, the low rumble of voices. The Alpha King was awake, and it seemed not alone. I rose and dressed quickly, choosing a simple blue dress that hung more comfortably on my frame than the green one had. After splashing water on my face and braiding my fair hair, I picked up Rowan and approached the connecting door, uncertain of the protocol. Should I wait to be summoned? Knock? Simply enter? My dilemma was solved when the door swung open, revealing Nathaniel in a black tunic and leather breeches, his hair damp as if from bathing. His eyes flicked over me briefly before settling on Rowan. Good. You're awake. His tone gave away nothing of his thoughts. Bring the pup. We have much to discuss. I followed him into his chambers, which looked different in the morning light. Less intimidating somehow, though no less grand. Eden was already awake, playing with a piece of leather in her fur nest. She dropped it when she saw her brother, letting out a happy yip. To my surprise, she transformed before my eyes, fur receding, limbs elongating, until a human child of perhaps 2 years lay in the nest, reaching out with small hands. "Ro!" she called, her voice clear and sweet. I gasped, nearly dropping Rowan in shock. Nathaniel turned, his expression somewhere between amusement and wariness. "You didn't know," he said, watching my face closely. "Truly." I shook my head, unable to find words. Rowan squirmed in my arms, and before I could react, he too began to transform, his wolf form shifting until I held a small boy, with the same amber eyes and a shock of dark hair. "They can shift," I whispered, stating the obvious in my astonishment, "but they're so young." Nathaniel took Rowan from my arms, setting him down beside his sister. The twins immediately began babbling to each other in a mixture of wolf sounds and half-formed words, seemingly delighted to be reunited in human form. "Wolf children can shift from birth," Nathaniel explained, his voice neutral, "though they can't control it well until they're older. They often shift during sleep or when emotions run high." He glanced at me. "I'm surprised they remained in wolf form for the entire time they were with you." The implication was clear. The pups had trusted me enough to stay vulnerable around me, which was either a mark in my favor or further evidence of my potential treachery, depending on how Nathaniel chose to interpret it. "Now," the Alpha King said, gesturing to a small table where breakfast had been laid out, "you will tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning." I sat across from him, accepting a cup of something that smelled like tea, but had a sharper, more herbal aroma. The twins played on a fur rug nearby, occasionally glancing up as if to ensure we were still there. 3 days ago," I began, "I went to gather herbs in the clearing by the white oak, the one with the stream running alongside it. I usually avoid going that deep into the forest, but I needed moonflower, which only grows in that particular spot." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "The white oak clearing is sacred ground. It's protected by our strongest wards. No human should be able to find it, let alone enter it." I shrugged, having no explanation for this. I've been going there since I was a child. My grandmother showed it to me. She said it was a place of power, but she never mentioned wards, or that it belonged to your pack. This revelation seemed to trouble Nathaniel. He leaned forward, studying my face. "Your grandmother, the previous healer. What was her name?" "Elise," I replied, confused by his sudden interest. "Elise Blackwood." Something flickered in Nathaniel's eyes. Recognition, followed by what might have been realization. "Blackwood," he repeated softly. "I see." Before I could ask what exactly he saw, he gestured for me to continue. "I found the pups near the stream," I went on. "They were huddled together under a fallen log, soaked through and burning with fever. I thought their mother might be nearby, so I waited for nearly an hour, but no one came." I paused, remembering my fear and indecision. I couldn't just leave them there to die. So I took them home, dried them, and began treating their fever. With what? Nathaniel asked sharply. Willow bark tea mostly, and yarrow compress for the fever. I mixed goat's milk with honey for strength. I glanced at the twins, who were now attempting to build a tower with small wooden blocks that had been left for them. The next day I tried to bring them back. I went to the clearing and waited, calling out. But the storm came so suddenly, I lost my way and had to return home. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, his fingers tapping against the wooden table. You say they were abandoned, he said finally, his voice deceptively calm, left to die of exposure and fever. Do you have any idea what that would mean? If true, I swallowed hard. It would mean someone in your pack wanted your children dead, not just someone. His eyes had darkened, the amber now burnished gold with anger. Someone with access to them, someone who could bypass the guards. Someone close. The implications hung heavy between us. Treachery within the inner circle of the pack, perhaps even within the family itself. You understand now why your story is difficult to believe, Nathaniel continued. It's far easier to think you somehow found your way onto our sacred ground and stole my children. But I didn't, I insisted, meeting his gaze despite the danger. I found them alone and sick. I cared for them. I tried to bring them back. So you claim... His voice had cooled again, distant and evaluating. Yet I have only your word for this. A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Thorn entered without waiting for a response, his silver eyebrows rising slightly at the sight of me seated at the Alpha's breakfast table like an honored guest. The council is assembled, he announced, his gaze shifting to the twins. His expression softened momentarily. They look well this morning. They are improving, Nathaniel acknowledged, rising to his feet. Ilara, you will remain here with the children while I attend to pack business. Guards will be posted at both doors. Do not attempt to leave this room. So much for being treated as a guest rather than a prisoner. I nodded stiffly, unwilling to argue in front of Thorn. As Nathaniel moved toward the door, Eden suddenly began to cry, reaching out with small hands toward her father. Papa! Papa, stay! The Alpha King hesitated, then returned to kneel beside his daughter. Papa must go for a little while, he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. Be good for Ilara. I'll return soon. Eden sniffled, lower lip trembling, but nodded bravely. Rowan crawled over to pat his sister's arm with clumsy affection, and the simple gesture made my heart twist painfully. They were so young, so innocent, unaware of the danger that had nearly claimed them, and might still be lurking nearby. After Nathaniel and Thorn departed, I was left alone with the twins in the silent chamber. Despite the Alpha's warning, I had no intention of trying to escape. Where would I go? I was deep in wolf territory, surrounded by those who would happily tear me apart if given the slightest excuse. Besides, I couldn't abandon the twins. Regardless of who their father was or the danger I faced, I had become attached to them. Their welfare mattered to me. I spent the morning playing with them, marveling at how quickly they shifted between human and wolf forms, seemingly without conscious thought. One moment, Eden would be stacking blocks with pudgy human fingers. The next, a wolf pup would be rolling on her back, paws in the air. Rowan seemed to shift less frequently, preferring his human form for play, though he would occasionally transform when his sister did, as if unwilling to be left behind. Around midday, the door opened to admit a young woman carrying a tray of food. She placed it on the table without meeting my eyes, then turned to leave. Wait, I called, please. She paused, looking uncertain. She couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, with dark hair pulled back in a simple braid and eyes that darted nervously toward the twins before returning to me. What's your name? I asked gently. Lily, she replied after a moment's hesitation. I help in the kitchens. Thank you for the food, Lily. I smiled, trying to put her at ease. Would you happen to know when the Alpha King might return? The little ones keep asking for him. This was a slight exaggeration. The twins had been too absorbed in their play to do more than occasionally glance at the door, but I was desperate for information about what was happening outside these walls. Lily bit her lip. The council meetings can last all day, she said quietly. Especially now with everything that's happened. You mean the twins' disappearance? I prompted. She nodded, then glanced over her shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. "Everyone's talking about it. About you. Some say you're a witch who bewitched the pups to follow you. Others say you're working with the Southern Pack, trying to steal our future Alpha and his sister." Neither accusation was flattering, but at least they were creatively absurd. "And what do you think, Lily?" She studied me for a long moment, then looked at the twins, who had paused in their play to watch her with curious eyes. Rowan smiled and offered her a block, a gesture of innocent friendship that seemed to make up her mind. "I think if you meant them harm, they wouldn't trust you the way they do," she said finally. "Wolf pups know. They sense things." Before I could respond, heavy footsteps approached in the hallway. Lily's eyes widened in alarm. "I should go. Please don't tell anyone I spoke to you." She slipped out just as a guard peered in, checking that all was well. Or perhaps ensuring I hadn't somehow escaped through a window with 2 wolf children in tow. The afternoon stretched on endlessly. The twins napped, woke hungry and demanding, and I fed them with food from the tray Lily had brought. They seemed stronger today, more energetic, a good sign that they were recovering from whatever illness had afflicted them. I was sitting on the floor, watching them chase each other in wolf form, when the door finally opened again. But it wasn't Nathaniel who entered. It was Sabine. Her red hair gleaming like copper in the late afternoon light, her eyes cold as she surveyed the domestic scene before her. "The Alpha King requires your presence in the Great Hall," she announced, her tone making it clear she'd rather be delivering a death sentence. "Now." "The children," I began, "will be cared for." She gestured, and 2 other women entered, moving immediately to gather up the twins, who had shifted back to human form at the interruption, and now regarded the newcomers with wary expressions. "It's all right," I told them, though I had no idea if that was true. "I'll be back soon." Eden's face crumpled, and she began to cry, reaching for me instead of the woman who tried to pick her up. Rowan, seeing his sister's distress, let out a fierce growl that would have been comical coming from such a small body if the situation weren't so tense. "Take them," Sabine snapped at the women. "The council is waiting." As the twins were carried away, their cries echoing down the hallway, Sabine turned to me with a smile that held no warmth. "The Alpha King may have been taken in by your innocent act," she said softly, "but the rest of us aren't so easily fooled. Whatever you did to make those children trust you, it won't save you now." She gripped my arm, her fingers digging in with inhuman strength, and began to march me toward the Great Hall and whatever judgment awaited me there. The Great Hall had transformed since my arrival the previous night. Now it was filled with wolves in human form, arranged in a rough semicircle around a raised platform where Nathaniel sat in a chair that could only be described as a throne, carved from a single massive tree trunk, adorned with runes, and the skulls of what appeared to be enormous wolves. Thorn stood at his right hand, his expression grave, while various other pack members I didn't recognize occupied positions of prominence nearby. Sabine pushed me forward until I stood at the center of their circle, alone and acutely aware of the dozens of predatory eyes fixed upon me. The hall fell silent, a tense, expectant hush that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. "Elara Blackwood," Nathaniel's voice carried effortlessly through the space, neither raised nor particularly cold, yet commanding absolute attention. "You stand before the Council of the Northern Pack accused of trespassing on sacred ground and interfering with the royal bloodline." I lifted my chin, refusing to be cowed despite the trembling in my knees. "I saved your children's lives," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I found them abandoned and sick. I cared for them. I tried to return them." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Clearly, many had not heard this version of events. "Silence," Nathaniel commanded, and the hall immediately stilled, his amber eyes fixed on me with disturbing intensity. "The council has spent the day deliberating on your claims and investigating the circumstances of my children's disappearance." My heart thundered in my chest. Had they found evidence to support my story? Or had they convinced themselves of my guilt, regardless of the facts? "Thorn," Nathaniel nodded to his advisor, "present what you've discovered." The silver-haired wolf stepped forward, his keen eyes sweeping over the assembled pack before settling on me. "We have examined the White Oak clearing," he began. "There were indeed signs of disturbance, scents that should not have been there, tracks partially obscured by the recent storm. He paused, and I held my breath, waiting for his next words. The guard assigned to the royal nursery on the night of the twins' disappearance has not reported for duty in 4 days, Thorn continued. His quarters were found empty, his belongings gone. He appears to have fled. A shocked murmur spread through the hall. Nathaniel's expression remained impassive, but his knuckles had whitened where they gripped the armrests of his throne. Furthermore, Thorn added, we found this hidden beneath the floorboards in his quarters. He held up a small vial containing traces of a dark liquid. Our own healer has confirmed it is hemlock extract, a poison that would have been fatal to wolf pups. Gasps and growls filled the hall. I felt lightheaded with relief. They had found evidence supporting my claim, evidence of treachery within the pack itself. This proves nothing. Sabine stepped forward, her voice cutting through the commotion. The guard could have been working with her. She jabbed a finger in my direction, a human accomplice to help him steal the children away, and then I decided to nurse them back to health instead of letting them die? I challenged, unable to contain my frustration. To what end? What possible reason would I have for such an elaborate scheme? The Southern Pack would pay handsomely for the Alpha King's heirs, a man's voice called from the crowd. Perhaps you planned to sell them once they were well enough to travel. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed, but the grim faces surrounding me made it clear they considered this a real possibility. I am a healer, I said, addressing the entire assembly now. My grandmother was a healer before me, and her mother before her. We have served our village for generations, bringing life, not death. I found 2 sick pups alone in the forest, and I did what any healer, any decent person would do. I helped them. My words seemed to resonate with some, their expressions softening slightly, but others remained suspicious, Sabine chief among them. The Blackwood name is known to us, Nathaniel said suddenly, drawing all eyes back to him. It has been many years since a Blackwood crossed our paths, but the bloodline is significant. I stared at him in confusion. What did he know of my family? My lord, Sabine protested. Surely you aren't suggesting that this human... I suggest nothing, Nathaniel cut her off. I merely state facts. Thorn has verified the lineage. Thorn nodded solemnly. The records confirm it. The last Blackwood to interact with our pack was Elise, who departed our territory 50 years ago to live among humans. She was born to our pack, but chose exile. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. My grandmother had been born to the wolf pack? Had been one of them? It seemed impossible, yet it would explain how she knew of the White Oak clearing, how I had been able to find it when other humans could not. She was not wolf, a gruff voice objected from the crowd. She was other. Other. The word hung in the air, laden with meaning I didn't understand, but which clearly held significance for everyone else in the hall. She was pack. Nathaniel's voice brooked no argument. As was her mother before her, the gift sometimes skips generations, but the blood remains. His penetrating gaze returned to me. Have you never wondered why the ill seek you out, Alara? Why wounds heal faster under your touch? Why animals trust you without question? I had wondered. Yes, these were things I'd noticed but dismissed as coincidence or simple skill born of practice. But the way Nathaniel spoke suggested something more, something innate, inherited. My grandmother never told me, I said quietly. She taught me about herbs and healing, but never this. She was protecting you, Thorn said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Knowledge of your heritage would have made you a target. For our enemies, and for those within our own pack who fear the other blood. Sabine made a noise of disgust. Even if she has the blood, she was not raised in our ways. She knows nothing of pack loyalty or honor. She cannot be trusted with the royal children. Yet they trust her, Nathaniel observed, his tone thoughtful. More than that, they chose her. Wolf children, especially those of royal blood, are drawn to those who can protect them. They sensed something in her that made them stay in her care, even when they could have shifted and sought help elsewhere. The implications of his words slowly dawned on me. The twins had stayed with me by choice, not necessity. They could have transformed to human form at any time, called for help. Yet they remained as wolf pups, allowing me to care for them. The royal children have chosen their guardian, Thorn announced formally. By ancient law, their choice must be honored, regardless of personal feelings or prejudices. Sabine's face contorted with fury. You cannot be serious. She is human. Is she? Nathaniel's question silenced the hall once more. He rose from his throne and descended the steps until he stood before me, close enough that I could see flecks of darker gold in his amber eyes. The Blackwood women have carried the gift for centuries, though they often choose to live among humans. Your grandmother was the last known carrier of the bloodline, until now. He reached out, and before I could react, took my hand in his. His touch was warm, almost burning against my skin. And something strange happened. A sensation like electricity running up my arm, across my chest, spreading throughout my body. I gasped, trying to pull away, but he held firm. You feel it, he said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. The connection to the pack, to the land. It has always been there, dormant within you. The twins sensed it. That's why they trusted you, why they still do. He released my hand, and I stumbled back a step, overwhelmed by sensations I couldn't name. Smells suddenly sharper, sounds clearer, as if some veil had been lifted from my senses. What did you do to me? I whispered. I awakened what was already there, Nathaniel replied. The dormant blood. You are not fully wolf, may never be. But you are not merely human either. You are other. A bridge between worlds. The hall had gone deathly silent. Even Sabine seemed too shocked to object further. By pack law and by blood right, I declare Alara Blackwood under the protection of the Alpha, Nathaniel announced, his voice ringing through the great hall. She will remain with us to care for the royal children and to learn of her heritage. Any who harm her answer directly to me. It was a decree, not an invitation. I had no more choice in this matter than I'd had in coming here in the first place. Yet something within me responded to his words. A strange sense of belonging I'd never felt before, not even in the village where I'd spent my entire life. The traitor who sought to harm my children remains at large, Nathaniel continued, addressing the entire pack now. The guard may have been a willing accomplice or a pawn, but I do not believe he acted alone. Someone of higher standing with access to the royal nursery orchestrated this treachery. I want them found. His gaze swept the assembly, and I noticed how many eyes dropped, unable to meet his. The implication was clear. He suspected the traitor might be among those present. Until the culprit is identified, security around the royal children will be doubled. Only those personally approved by me will be permitted near them. His eyes found mine again. Alara will be their primary caregiver, under my direct supervision. Sabine could contain herself no longer. My lord, I have served as the twins' caregiver since their birth, since their mother. Enough. The single word carried such authority that Sabine physically recoiled. Nathaniel's expression had darkened dangerously. My decision is final. The council is dismissed. The assembly began to disperse, many casting curious or hostile glances in my direction as they filed out. Sabine lingered, her eyes burning with hatred when they met mine, before she too turned and stalked away. Within minutes, only Nathaniel, Thorn, and I remained in the great hall. My head was spinning with revelations and questions, my body still tingling from whatever Nathaniel had awakened within me. The children? I asked, finding my voice at last. Where are they? In my private chambers, Nathaniel replied. I had them brought there when it became clear the council session would extend into the evening. Thorn approached, his expression troubled. Nathaniel, you know what this means. If she truly carries the bloodline, and the children have chosen her, I know exactly what it means. Nathaniel cut him off, his tone leaving no room for further discussion. He turned to me. Come, the twins will be anxious to see you. As we left the great hall, I felt the weight of Thorn's gaze on my back, heavy with unspoken significance. Whatever had just transpired meant far more than I understood, something beyond my newly discovered heritage, or my role as caregiver to the royal children. Something that made even the Alpha King's trusted advisor uneasy. In the gathering darkness outside, a wolf howled, a lone, mournful sound that raised goosebumps on my arms, despite the awakened blood now flowing through my veins. It sounded like a warning, or perhaps a prophecy. The days that followed passed in a blur of new routines and unfamiliar customs. I remained in the healer's quarters beside Nathaniel's chambers, caring for the twins while gradually learning about my unexpected heritage. Thorn became my reluctant teacher, sharing carefully measured knowledge about the Blackwood women who had come before me. Healers with the rare ability to walk between the human and wolf worlds, neither fully one nor the other. "Your grandmother was the strongest of her line," he told me one afternoon, as we gathered herbs in a small garden behind the Great Hall. "She could sense illness before it manifested, could ease pain with just a touch. Some said she could even see glimpses of the future, though she denied it." "Why did she leave?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since the council meeting. If she was respected here, why go live among humans? Thorn's hand stilled over the rosemary he'd been cutting. "Love," he said simply. "She fell in love with a human man who had been brought to her for healing. When he recovered, she chose to follow him back to his village, rather than remain with the pack." The answer resonated within me. My grandfather had died before I was born, but my grandmother had spoken of him with such tenderness, such abiding love, that I'd always felt I knew him. The thought that she had given up her place, her heritage, her power for love made perfect sense. The Alpha at the time, Nathaniel's grandfather, was furious. Thorn continued. He considered it a betrayal of the pack. Others saw it differently. The Blackwood women have always charted their own paths, following instincts deeper than pack law. His words carried a weight I couldn't quite decipher, as if he were trying to tell me something without saying it directly. Before I could press for clarification, Eden came running into the garden, her small face alight with excitement. "Elara, come see, Rowan is shifting." She tugged at my hand, practically vibrating with energy. I followed her back to Nathaniel's chambers, where we'd left Rowan napping. Inside, I found Nathaniel already there, watching with an expression of pride as his son transformed from human to wolf and back again, each shift smoother than the last. "He's gaining control," Nathaniel said without looking up. Earlier than expected, I knelt beside Rowan, who grinned at me with childish delight, before shifting once more into wolf form, his amber eyes bright with accomplishment. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased for him. Both of them are recovering so quickly. The twins had indeed flourished in the weeks since my arrival. Their fevers were long gone, their energy boundless, their control over their shifting improving daily. Soon, they would no longer need my special care, a reality I tried not to dwell on, for it raised uncomfortable questions about my own future here. Nathaniel's gaze shifted to me, studying me with that penetrating intensity that still made my heart beat faster. "They thrive because of you," he said quietly. "Your blood calls to theirs. It's why they chose you in the clearing." The theory that the twins had deliberately sought me out rather than being truly abandoned had been gaining traction over the past weeks. The guard who had fled remained missing, but evidence of his treachery was mounting. Missing poison vials, suspicious payments, secret meetings with unknown figures at the border of packlands. "You think they sensed me nearby?" I asked, still skeptical despite everything I'd learned about my heritage. That they somehow knew a Blackwood was within reach? Wolf children, especially those of royal blood, can sense those who would protect them. Nathaniel reached out to ruffle Rowan's fur, earning a playful nip at his fingers. "When threatened, they seek safety. You were the safest option they could find." The idea was both flattering and terrifying, that these tiny beings had placed such trust in me, had sought me out in their moment of greatest need. "The traitor has made no further moves," I observed, changing the subject. "Perhaps they've given up, now that security has been increased." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "They've not given up. They're watching, waiting for another opportunity. I can feel it." Despite weeks of investigation, the mastermind behind the plot to harm the twins remained unidentified. Suspicion had fallen on various pack members, those who might benefit from the royal children's deaths, those with connections to rival packs, those who had opposed Nathaniel's rise to power after his father's death. Yet no conclusive evidence had been found against anyone. The tension was wearing on Nathaniel. Though he rarely spoke of it, I could see it in the tightness around his eyes. The way he checked and rechecked the guards posted at every entrance, the long nights he spent pacing his chambers while the twins and I slept. "You need rest," I said impulsively, reaching out to touch his arm before I could think better of it. "You're no good to them exhausted." His eyes widened slightly at my touch, but he didn't pull away. Instead, something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I'll rest when they're safe," he replied, his voice low. "When the threat is eliminated." Our gazes held for a moment longer than necessary, and I felt that strange electrical sensation again, the awakened blood responding to his proximity. I withdrew my hand first, turning my attention back to the twins, who were now playing some complicated game that involved shifting back and forth between forms with increasing speed. That evening, a feast was held to celebrate the full moon, an important occasion in pack culture, Thorn had explained. The great hall was transformed with additional torches and garlands of autumn flowers, tables groaning with food, musicians playing in one corner. The entire pack attended, dressed in their finest, the usual hierarchies temporarily relaxed in celebration. I sat at the high table beside Nathaniel, the twins between us, acutely aware of the stares and whispers my position elicited. Though the Alpha King's decree had granted me protected status, many still viewed me with suspicion or outright hostility. Sabine, relegated to a lower table for the first time since the twins' birth, made no attempt to hide her resentment. "Ignore them," Nathaniel murmured, correctly interpreting my discomfort. "They'll adjust. The pack always does eventually, and if they don't?" I asked, watching as Eden carefully navigated a spoonful of stew to her mouth, fiercely independent even at her young age. "Then that is their problem, not yours," he replied simply. "You have earned your place here, Alara Blackwood." Something in the way he said my name made heat rise to my cheeks. I looked down at my plate, unsure how to respond. Over the weeks, something had shifted between us, the initial suspicion and hostility giving way to a wary respect, then to something more complicated that neither of us seemed willing to name. As the feast progressed, the twins grew sleepy, their small bodies warm against mine, as they leaned into me with complete trust. Rowan had already dozed off, his head resting against my arm, while Eden fought to keep her eyes open, determined not to miss any of the celebration. "I should take them to bed," I said softly to Nathaniel. "They're exhausted." He nodded, rising to his feet. The hall immediately fell silent, all eyes turning toward the Alpha King. "Continue," he commanded with a dismissive gesture before turning back to me. "I'll accompany you. The corridors can be confusing after dark." This was a transparent excuse. I had been navigating the warren of hallways for weeks now without difficulty, but I didn't challenge it. Perhaps he too was ready for a respite from the staring eyes and whispered comments. We walked in companionable silence, each carrying a sleeping child. The twins had shifted to wolf form in their sleep, as they often did when deeply relaxed. Rowan's small body was warm against my chest, his soft breaths tickling my neck as I carried him. When we reached Nathaniel's chambers, we laid the pups in their shared basket near the fire, now positioned between his room and mine since they often preferred to sleep together. They curled around each other instinctively, Rowan's silver-white fur contrasting with Eden's slightly darker coat. "They look so peaceful," I whispered, reluctant to break the moment. "So innocent. They are the future of our pack," Nathaniel replied, his voice equally soft. "Everything I do for them, to protect them, to prepare them for what lies ahead." There was a heaviness to his words that made me look up at him questioningly. In the flickering firelight, his face seemed more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it, the stern alpha momentarily set aside to reveal the worried father beneath. "You're a good father," I said, meaning it. Despite his fearsome reputation, I had seen nothing but tenderness from him when he was with his children. A shadow crossed his features. Their mother would disagree. It was the first time he had mentioned the twins' mother in my presence. I knew from overheard conversations that she had left shortly after their birth, returning to her own pack in the distant mountains. The circumstances of her departure were never discussed openly, becoming hushed whispers whenever I approached. "She left them," I said. Not a question, but a statement of understanding. "Left you." Nathaniel moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit forest beyond. She came here as part of an alliance between our packs, he said after a moment. The marriage was arranged. The children expected to cement the bond between our bloodlines, but she never wanted this life, never wanted them. When they were barely a month old, she renounced her claim on them and returned to her family. The pain in his voice was carefully controlled but unmistakable, not the pain of lost love, perhaps, but certainly the pain of betrayal, of watching someone walk away from the tiny lives they had created together. "I'm sorry," I said simply, knowing no words could truly address such abandonment. He turned back to me, his expression inscrutable once more. "It was for the best. The twins deserve someone who chooses them, who sees their value beyond political advantage or bloodlines." His eyes held mine. "Someone like you." The words hung in the air between us, laden with meaning I both understood and feared to acknowledge. In the weeks I had spent caring for his children, something had grown between us, a trust, a respect, perhaps even the beginnings of something deeper. "I should go," I said, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "It's been a long evening." As I turned toward the connecting door, a small sound stopped me, a tiny whimper from the pup's basket, followed by a more distressed cry. Eden had awakened, her small wolf body trembling violently as she shifted abruptly back to human form, her face contorted with fear. "Papa! Ilara!" she cried, reaching for us both with desperate hands. "Bad lady coming!" Nathaniel was at her side in an instant, gathering her into his arms. "Shh, little one. You're safe. It was just a dream." But Eden shook her head vehemently. "Not dream. Saw her. Bad lady with the red hair. She has the sharp thing for Rowan." My blood ran cold. "Sabine," I whispered, looking to Nathaniel in alarm. His expression hardened, the vulnerable father vanishing beneath the Alpha King's mask once more. He set Eden back in the basket beside her still sleeping brother, then strode to a wooden chest near the bed. From it, he withdrew a wicked-looking dagger with runes etched along its blade. "Stay with them," he commanded, moving toward the door. "Bar it behind me. Let no one in but me." "Nathaniel, wait," I called. But he was already gone, the door closing firmly behind him. With trembling hands, I secured the heavy wooden bar across the door, then gathered both children into my arms, moving them to Nathaniel's massive bed where I could better protect them. Eden was still shaking, her small face buried against my neck, while Rowan had awakened and shifted to human form, confused but picking up on his sister's distress. "It's all right," I soothed, though my own heart was racing. "Your father will handle this. We're safe here." But even as I spoke the words, I wondered if they were true, if Eden's vision, for I had no doubt now that the Blackwood gift of foresight had manifested in her, was accurate. Then Sabine was the traitor we had been seeking, the one who had tried once to harm the royal children, and might now be making a second attempt. And Nathaniel had gone to confront her alone. Time stretched endlessly as I waited, telling the twins stories to distract them, singing old lullabies my grandmother had taught me. Eventually, they drifted back to sleep, curled against me like the pups they were at heart. Still, Nathaniel did not return. When the door finally shuttered beneath a heavy knock, I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Ilara." Nathaniel's voice came through the thick wood. "It's done. Open the door." My legs were weak with relief as I carefully extracted myself from the sleeping children and moved to lift the bar. The door swung open to reveal Nathaniel, his clothing disheveled, a small cut on his cheek but otherwise unharmed. "Sabine?" I asked, searching his face. "Captured," he replied grimly. She confessed under questioning. She had been working with the Southern Pack, promised power and position if she eliminated my heirs and weakened our bloodline. The guard was her lover, manipulated into helping her. I let out a shaky breath. And now? She will face pack justice at dawn. His eyes were cold, resolute. The punishment for treason is death. Despite everything Sabine had done, her hatred toward me, her plot against innocent children, I felt a moment of pity for her. But only a moment. She had nearly succeeded in killing 2 innocent pups for her own ambition. Whatever punishment awaited her, she had earned it. "The twins?" Nathaniel asked, his gaze softening as he looked past me to where they slept on his bed. "Safe," I assured him. "They're sleeping now." Eden's gift. It saved them. Saved you, perhaps. He nodded, the weight of the evening's events visible in the slump of his shoulders. The Blackwood gift is strong in her, as it is in you, though differently expressed. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of fair hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. You have become essential to this pack, Elara Blackwood, to my children, to me. The confession, spoken in the quiet aftermath of danger, carried a vulnerability I had never expected to hear from the Alpha King. My heart thundered in my chest as his hand lingered, warm against my cheek. I should never have doubted you, he continued, his voice low. From the moment you faced us in your cottage, refusing to yield despite your fear, I should have recognized what the twins already knew, that you belong here, with them. With us. Us. A simple word that contained worlds of meaning, of possibility. I had come here as a prisoner, remained as a caregiver, but now stood on the threshold of something else entirely, something I had never dared to imagine. I don't know if I can be what you need me to be, I whispered, honesty compelling me to voice my doubts. I'm still learning about my heritage, still understanding what it means to be other. You are exactly what we need you to be, Nathaniel replied, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight. What you are is enough. It always has been. As dawn broke over the mountains, bathing the Alpha's chambers in golden light, I made my choice, not out of obligation or fear, but out of the love that had grown within me for 2 small lives and, against all odds, for the fierce, complicated man who had brought me into this new world. The pack came for blood that night in my cottage, but found their pups asleep on an Omega's chest, and the Alpha King relented. Now, moons later, they would find something else entirely. A family forged through danger and trust. A bridge between 2 worlds in the form of a healer with newly awakened blood, and an Alpha King who had discovered that the greatest strength sometimes lies in yielding to the unexpected. In the bed behind us, the twins stirred, reaching out with sleepy hands to find us both nearby. Together we went to them, 2 guardians now instead of 1, bound by something stronger than pack law or ancient bloodlines, by choice, by love, by the future we would build together.